Hello, Professor. I'm Leher Rajput and I'm in your BAB 231 NGG course. And this is the video for the second part of the asynchronous assignment. So you asked me to read the instructions for both the pine needles and the Ontario place, and then there were a set of questions that I need to answer. So the first question is, how would you resolve the conflict between what the pine needles want for the dressing rooms and Ontario Place's refusal to make any change? What do you think the two parties would have ultimately negotiated that met both parties' needs? So when I read both the parties' instructions, what I realized is that the pine needles is really particular about how they want their dressing room. They are a nature lover, so they want their dressing room to reflect the nature. They want their walls to be painted a certain way so that they reflect the forest trees, and then they want a lot of wood and they want the forest smell. And on the other hand, the Ontario Place, the owner of the Ontario Place, is completely against making any structural changes to the dressing room because they're against the expenditure that it takes to make changes to the dressing room, and also because they need to keep making changes for every other concert. So it's a lot of time and money that has to be spent. So the owner of Ontario Place is completely against spending a lot of money on the structural changes, and that he's adamant that he's not gonna make any changes to the dressing room. However, he will provide decorations for the room, but structural changes won't take place. So I think, first of all, the negotiation will obviously start by the pine needles telling the Ontario Place manager that they want all this done. And then the Ontario Place manager has to understand that at the back of his mind, he already knows that structural changes cannot take place. So he can start off by saying that obviously structural changes are not something that we provide in our contract, but the decorations they can provide. So a common point that they can agree upon, both the parties, is that painting of the walls won't take place, but probably the wood and the scent. And if they really want the resemblance, maybe the Ontario Place manager can also provide wallpapers, like the stick-on wallpapers that are really cheap, and that work as paint, like temporary paint, and can give the pine needles the feel that they want, and the overall decoration can take place at a reasonable budget, and both the parties can be happy. So I think the negotiation that can take place is that decorations can be provided, the minimum decorations. The manager, and it's also said that the owner understands that sometimes it's really important to meet with the other parties' requirements. So they should understand that pine needles is like a rising pop star, so they're getting famous, so that can also be beneficial for the Ontario Place. So they don't have to make any structural changes to the dressing room, but they can surely provide these decorations like the wood or the scent, or there are a lot of cheap wallpapers, so probably that, and they can make the room as per not exactly how the pine needles wanted, but at least 80-85% to how they would want it. The second question was, if you were negotiating for the pine needles, explain how you would initiate the negotiation on the ticket price. What number would you start at? What number would you expect them to start at? How would you get Ontario Place to go higher? So when I read the instructions, what I realized is both of them want about the same amount of profitability. Even the Ontario Place wants $30 of profitability, and even the pine needles want $30 to $40 per ticket. So it's not like there's a huge price difference. Both of them want the same thing. So keeping that in mind, I think the pine needles, what they would start at and what even I would want them to start at is $80 per ticket, because $30 to $40. So they would want around $40 for themselves. So they would start at $80. But then when Ontario Place owner strictly said that the most they can charge for a ticket is $75, and that even they want a $30 profit. So the Ontario place would probably negotiate for a $70 price, is what I think, because even if they keep $30 profitability to themselves, Pine Needles is gonna get $40. So that like balances everybody's requirement. So $70 actually seems better. But because they are rising, and because the pine needles are they're rising, and they obviously would want to make more money, they would try to come at a midpoint. So they would say, okay, let's not make it $80, let's not make it 70, let's make it 75. And obviously, who doesn't like more profitability? So even if like Ontario Place is already making $30, they would like think, if I keep it 75, I would get like a $35 profitability, and it's good for me, and it's within the budget. It's within the requirement, because the most he can charge is $35, $75. So everybody's requirements are getting met, and Ontario Place is getting a little more than what they expected, and so is the pine needles. So everybody's requirements are getting full. So I think if the pine needle starts at $80 and if Ontario Place starts at 70, they can both come at a midpoint at 75. I think this is what would have originally taken place between them, honestly. Yeah. The next question is, what is one out of the box thing that you can add to the negotiations to help reach a deal? Explain what that is, who would initiate that idea, and how it is helpful. So we already know that the two parties have a lot of like conflicting ideas. They have opposite wants. Both of them like want different things. So it's actually difficult to make a negotiation between them. They're actually going to have to, face a lot of problems in between. So one deal breaker could be, when I read Ontario Place's instructions, I read that the owner isn't a big fan of music, but he is a big fan. He's a big collector of the concert memorabilia, and that he does make rare exceptions for souvenirs that he could collect from the concert. So the Pine Needles could offer a rare souvenir of their concert for the owner, which could, help melt down the situation and help like ease down the negotiations. Probably they could offer a really limited time exclusive disc of their concert, or like a signed disc of their concert, something that acts as a really good souvenir, a rare souvenir of the concert that took place. And they could offer that to the owner. So that could be a deal breaker, and I think that could really help make the deal successful, because negotiations are all about making each other happy. So this deal would be from the Pine Needles point of view, and because it's a really exclusive thing and everybody would have been dying to actually own a signed exclusive disc of Pine Needles, like a music disc, if they offer that to the owner, it acts as the perfect concert memorabilia, and it will make the Ontario Place owner really happy. And then even he can ease down and the negotiation can take place in a better way, because he got impressed that took place and it balanced out the negotiation. So I think that could be a deal breaker. It is one out of the box thing that can take place from the Pine Needles point of view. And the last question was, identify what you think would be the hardest part of the negotiation and explain why, and identify how you would attempt to resolve that issue. So I think that the biggest problem while a negotiation takes place is the attitude, and basically the attitude of the people, the self-esteem that comes in between. People usually seem to boast their self-esteem when they're making such negotiations, and their ego is something that they stand upon very stubbornly. They're not ready to listen to the other person because they think they are superior than the other one. So that's when the negotiation doesn't take place. You have to be really humble, generous, you have to be mindful, you have to be a good listener, you have to be very adjusting. This is the main thing, that you have to be able to learn how to adjust with what other people want. You have to be a very good listener. You have to be very polite, and you have to put your ego aside. I think that's the hardest part of the negotiation, is when people refuse to put their egos and their attitudes aside to come together and talk to each other. They don't let their self-esteem come any lower. They always look down upon the other person, and that's what the hardest part is. And because it says that the Pine Needles is a rising pop star, their minds are all filled with flurry. They're on cloud 19, so probably they're not ready to listen to anybody else, because the instructions also say that they're used to people serving them the way they want to. They literally tell people to do what they want them to do. They get them doing what they want. So it's like a thing in their head that they will only get what they actually want, and they will make people work in that particular way. So that, I think, is a really wrong thing, and it's the hardest part of the negotiation, because you need to understand that everybody has different wants and requirements. And to come at a midpoint, you need to let go of some things, you need to compromise some things, you need to respect each other's point of views, and only then can a successful negotiation take place. So I think how I would attempt to resolve that issue is that if I would be the manager of Pine Needles, I would make them understand that at the end we do need a place for the concert, and if we're so stubborn with our requirements, we might not actually be able to find a good place till the end. So I would tell the Pine Needles to be a little humble and generous towards the other party that they're having the contract with. And even in place of even when I'm talking for the Ontario place, I would tell the owner to be a little more considerate of the band's requirements, because in the end, if the band actually plays at the Ontario place, it's going to be very beneficial and very profitable for the Ontario place as well, because they're very rising. So the place will get very famous, and it might be able to earn more revenue. What I'll tell both of them is to listen to each other, be more generous, be patient, and understand that working with each other is going to be profitable for both of them. So don't stay stubborn or stick to what you want for future profits or for future benefits. Let go of what you're holding on to right now. Even if you let go 20%, it'll be really profitable to you in the future. So yeah, I think that is how I would attempt to resolve the issue. Thank you.